Hi. So, people have been asking me to review The Amazing Spider-Man 2, the new game that came out with the new movie. I don't know why I seem to be the authority on Spider-Man games, but I'm gonna go pick it up after I'm done recording this. I went to see The Amazing Spider-Man 2, the movie, today, because I didn't want to spoil the movie for myself by playing the game, and also, I was going to buy the game earlier this week, but apparently there are certain games you can't buy on the Wii U's virtual store. You have to buy them retail, a physical copy, and The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 are both some of those games. I just thought I'd make a quick video about my thoughts on the movie. Also, the next review I'm going to do, for those who missed the Easter egg in my Green Lantern video, is Aquaman: Battle for Atlantis. I know it's one that people have been asking for a while. And I'm going to do the Amazing Spider-Man 2 after that. It's kind of a case of I'm too close to the end of Aquaman to start something else right now. So that's what's going on in terms of reviews. I was going to put out something for Star Wars Day, but I didn't want to rush the script. Now, anyway, so let's talk about the movie. Amazing Spider-Man 2, the movie, I liked it and I didn't like it. Like, it's an entertaining enough movie, but it has a few big problems that are probably going to ruin it for some people. The movie has two major problems, and whether you like the movie or not is going to depend on how much these two problems bug you. Um, the movie story is a mess. I mean, it has a good story. It's just it's got like seven different plot threads going on at the same time, and they don't mesh together. It's like we've got seven stories going on at once, and they don't come together until the end. It's like instead of having these stories woven together, it's like you ping pong between them until the end. It's like Peter rekindles his friendship with his friend Harry, who's dying of a disease that he inherited from his father. That doesn't tie into anything else until the end. Max Dillon becomes Electro, gets a god complex, and decides to take over the city. Basically, that doesn't tie anything until the end. Peter's he has to stay away from Gwen, who's going away for college at Oxford, and that doesn't tie into anything until the end. Oscorp has a big conspiracy that it kind of ties into everything. It's basically they're building super soldiers, and the movie never really explains why, other than to set up the Sinister Six. And just we and that sort of ties into everything, but is still left hanging there. Peter's still trying to figure out why his mother and father went missing. That doesn't really tie into much. It sort of ties into Harry's story. The story about Harry having a disease is resolved really awkwardly because if you've seen any of the trailers, you know that Harry becomes the Green Goblin by the end of the film. He puts on the Goblin armor, and then it says you're healed. We detect an injury. Your injury is now healed, and then he's not dying anymore. It's like this thing is a half-built Iron Man armor. How the hell did it cure a genetic disease that's afflicting him? It's like the first main problem with the movie, it's got like several threads going on at once, and that's not a bad thing. The bad thing is they don't interlap with one another. Like they come together at the end, but until then, it's like you've got five disjointed stories going on at once. Almost like they filmed five movies that are fighting for screen time again until the end. And just the way that you can tell that this movie had a lot of content cut out of it because I heard somewhere that Mary Jane was cast, but she doesn't appear once in the movie. About half the scenes in the trailers don't appear in the movie. This movie had big cuts, you can tell. And part of me thinks like they just shot these scenes. They shot several scenes and then decided we'll figure out how they fit together later. But the movie is structured such that I'm getting to the second big problem now. The movie is structured such that there's not really a villain. I mean, there's three villains, but I don't know how you do this. You make a movie with three villains, but Spider-Man's not fighting anyone most of the time. It's like there are three villains: Electro, Green Goblin, Rhino. Rhino does not appear until the last 2 minutes of the movie. I'm not making that up, and I'm not exaggerating. He doesn't show up until the last 2 minutes of the movie. Like, after the final fight, Spider-Man decides to stop being Spider-Man, and he becomes Spider-Man again when the Rhino starts his rampage. And that's all they use Rhino for. He doesn't show up until the very end. And Green Goblin doesn't... Harry's... the movie actually does have a really good story, a really good character development of Harry, where he kind of is descending slowly into madness, and he doesn't become the Green Goblin until close to the end. And Electro is defeated a little bit before the halfway point of the movie, he gets sent to prison, and then he sits out the movie until the climax. So it's like, through pretty much the entire second act of the movie, there's no villain. It's like this huge chunk of movie. There's it's just setup for what's going to be the final battle. And again, the movie has a good story. There's a lot of it's just there's no villain for a huge chunk of the movie. That's the thing that bothered me. The thing that bothered me about the movie the most is that it just felt like setup. It felt like the movie felt like setup. There wasn't anything going on except setting up plot points that will pay off in the climax, which the climax is very good, I thought. The movie doesn't have a bad story because it has Electro's got a really good character arc, Harry's got a good character arc, Spider-Man's got a good character arc. It's not a bad story because it's a very character-driven story. It's just odd for a superhero movie where there's no villain through a very large chunk of the movie. It's just odd. Anyway, that's the big problem I had with the movie. Just really weird structure, and the fact that it's not that there was too much going on at once, it's that the stuff that was going on didn't tie in together. It was an entertaining movie. It's just, this is going to be one of those movies where I think it's probably going to be one of those where you like it less and less each time you watch it. Because as a popcorn movie, it's got good action. It's just the story is structured really weird. There were plenty of things I liked about the movie. Again, I like the characters. The actors they got to play all their characters are good. The character arcs are all solid. Spider-Man fires off quips constantly while he's in the middle of action, which is what Spider-Man is supposed to do. And so it feels like they got the character right because he acts like Spider-Man. You see him several times put himself in harm's way to save others, something Superman could have learned a lesson from in Man of Steel, cough, cough. He fires off quips constantly. It feels very true to the real Spider-Man. The costume looks great. And even though the movie structure is weird, it's paced really well. Like, the movie never feels like it's going slowly. There's always story developments going on. There's always something going on to hold your interest. You're not bored. It's hard to avoid the feeling during the movie that there's no villain and you're just watching setup. It's just an odd feeling. Just a few just random observations I made. There's no scene during the end of the credits. There aren't any scenes during the credits. Just so you know, because I sat through the credits and there aren't any scenes. But during the credits, the credits cut out and they played an action sequence from X-Men: Days of Future Past. And I know that's not supposed to be in there because the Spider-Man movies are Sony and the X-Men films are Fox. So I know that's not supposed to be in there. I think that's just something my theater cut in. I don't know how that got in there. Something that kind of made me laugh is before Electro becomes Electro, like, there's a scientist that tells him, go fix that wire in the ceiling, and he says, but Dr. Smythe, and I'm like, Dr. Smythe, aren't you the villain from the Amazing Spider-Man 1 video game? Aren't you very, very dead? Apparently, again, not that this is a bad thing by any means, but that video game apparently is no longer a part of the continuity. What else problems did I have with the movie? Now I remember something else I was going to complain about. This ties into the villain problem, too. Spider-Man does not fight the Rhino. Like, Rhino shows up, and the very last shot of the movie is that whole like the two people charging at each other about to fight, and then the movie cuts to credits, like right before the action sequence starts. I don't know if that was due to budget, but it was like, I know they wanted to end on that big Spider-Man's back triumphant thing, but it's just weird. They marketed the Rhino. They made a point of advertising the Rhino. A, he doesn't show up until the last until the last 2 minutes of the movie, and B, Spider-Man doesn't actually fight him. And the fight with the Green Goblin was pathetic. Because, as an emotional scene, the fight between Green Goblin and Spider-Man works well, because, it's kind of the old Star Wars thing, where it's like the lightsaber fights in the original trilogy weren't very good, but they were still entertaining because of the emotional dynamics between them. It's the same kind of the same thing with this fight with the Green Goblin, because a third of the fight is off screen, a third of the fight is too jumbled and frantic to make out, and a third of the secrets of the fight is just Goblin has Spider-Man pinned down and is trying to stab him. So it's like we've got three villains. One you don't fight, and the other one another one the fight sucks. And the one villain that Spider-Man does fight that does have a good fight scene, Electro, sits out for most of the movie. Like I did like the movie. I did because the action sequences are good. It has good. The individual stories, they don't mesh very well together, but the individual stories are good. Like Peter reunites with his friend Harry, but Harry starts going off the deep end and going off fast. Like Peter has to stay away from Gwen, but he can't because he still really cares about her. The storyline of Peter wants to be with Gwen, but he can't, is probably the biggest weak spot of the movie. They have good chemistry, but the movie keeps stopping so that Peter can brood about how he can't be with Gwen. It's like that storyline is good, but the way it's worked into the movie is like the storyline materializes as Peter just keeps stopping to go. It's just odd. It's like the individual stories are good, so they just don't mesh together. Well, I'm just repeating myself. I guess this is the reason why I talk about video games and not movies. In case you haven't heard, they're making a Sinister Six movie. I don't know how they're going to do a Sinister Six movie because that's six villains together and no hero, unless it's I assume they were going to use the Sinister Six for a next Spider-Man movie, but apparently they're getting their own spin-off. And it kind of does, you know how at the end of the Avengers it does like close-ups of digital makeups of all the heroes' weapons? It does the same thing at the end of this movie, except it's close-ups of the Sinister Six's machinery, like Doc Ock's tentacles, the Goblin's glider, and the Vulture's wings, except they weren't in this movie. Why are you doing zoom-ins of these characters that weren't in this movie? That's not going to mean anything to anyone that isn't a fan of the Spider-Man already. So it's like, that's probably one of the reasons why this movie's story is such a mess, because they had to set up the Sinister Six, and they spend a long time setting up the Sinister Six, because that's what the Oscorp conspiracy is about. Again, they don't mention why they're building super soldiers, they just mention that they are. And they're also making a Venom movie, which I heard people saying their movie was full of marketing for the Venom movie. It's not. It's like the mutated spider that turned Spider into Spider-Man. The mutated spider that turned Peter Parker into Spider-Man in the first movie, they killed him, and Harry Osborn's assistant says, they killed the spiders, but they kept the venom. There, that's all the build-up for the Venom movie, so... But, I mean, if I were to guess why this movie's story is a mess, I'd guess that it's because they had to build up the Sinister Six. They, like I said, it feels like they just shot a bunch of scenes and then worried about how they were going to cut them together later. And it's going to be like a love it or hate it movie. It's whether or not the disjointed feeling in the story and the feel that it's just build up and not for the most of the movie. It's entirely subjective whether that's going to bug you enough to hate the movie or not. Because if you can get past that, or if that just feeling of the storytelling doesn't bother you, you're gonna like it. Because honestly, a few minor plot holes like how Harry gets magically cured aside, that's really the big problem with the movie. And I can't think of anything else offhand that's a huge problem. Because like, I liked it. It just has a big. I liked the movie. It just has a odd story to it, and I'm talking in circles. This is why I don't do a lot of these, or this is why I always have a script on hand. That's my 2 cents worth of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I'll go out and get the game and play and start playing it. Oh, one more thing. people seem to be more excited for the video game than they are for the movie, strangely enough. And really, if you've seen any of the trailers, there's only one big spoiler in the movie that the game is going to give away for you. And if you're a fan of Spider-Man, you already know what the twist is. Like, if you're at all a fan of Spider-Man, you already know what the big twist of this movie is, so you don't really need to worry about avoiding spoilers. So, all I can say is that you knew if you saw the first movie that there was a big twist coming, and they pulled the trigger on that twist in this film. That's the only big spoiler you're gonna get if you decide to play the game first. Okay. Now I'm gonna go because I'm expecting company. So, have a good day and enjoy Happy Star Wars Day.